all for joining us today. We have Jack Korpela with us. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. We have had quite a 48 hours so far, meeting all these legends and all these passionate fans. It's a lot of fun to be here, and I know you have quite a bit of an experience yourself, so it's cool to sit up here with you.
Well, thank you. It's truly my honor to be up here with you for sure. So to start off today, can you tell us kind of how you first discovered wrestling?
Yes, I can. I remember it vividly. In fact, all right, so I just turned 40. I was born in 1982. So WrestleMania 3, when Andre and Hogan faced off and Hogan slammed Andre, I was 4, getting ready to turn 5. I can remember that. The reason I can remember that is I wasn't even old enough to be a fan yet, but back then they used to have big pay-per-view parties, and my dad was in on it. And he would take me there, and I remember somebody saying, "Oh my God, Hulk Hogan's crying, he's so overcome with emotion." And I never forgot it. And then it wasn't until 2 years later at that same party, I was being a bad boy, throwing pool balls off the wall, whatever, and some guy grabbed me and said, "Kid, sit down." And he made me watch Hulk Hogan versus Macho Man, the main event, WrestleMania 5. After that, it was over. I had to have every action figure, every magazine, and just loved it forever.
And how did you get your start in the business?
I got out of college in 2005. I went to the University of Florida for broadcasting. My dream was to be a sports broadcaster. And what you do back in those days, the world changed so fast, is it was still VHS that I'd send them out to 30 or 40 news stations where you hoped and prayed you would get a job, or maybe even the very few entertainment outlets out there, whether it was locally or nationally. So on a whim, I said, let me send WWE one. I never even thought in a million years to send them one. I came home, and my stepdad's watching Stone Cold on TV. I said, I wonder if they're ever hiring. Sent him in a tape, and didn't hear anything back for about 5 months, and figured, nah, this is never going to happen. And 5 months later, they called me in for an interview, and it was the opportunity of a lifetime to go up there and audition. I had an audition in Stamford, Connecticut, right in WWE headquarters. And it was amazing. And I remember leaving there saying, if nothing ever comes of this opportunity in and of itself was astounding. And then what happened after that was I interviewed in May and didn't hear anything back, kept following up, still didn't hear anything back. Got to the middle of the summer. At that point, I remember my stepdad was saying, you better think about going to get that part-time job. Doesn't look like this wrestling dream's coming true. And I was right there with them, but I couldn't get them to say anything back. One of my friends finally shed some light, and he's like, hey, if they haven't told you no yet, hang in there. You never know, because they're probably pretty quick to say no. And offer came. It was September of 2006. I got a call. I figured they were calling to say it was a rejection call. I was actually on my way to another job interview, and they said, we'd like to make you an offer, 1-year contract. And I almost crashed my Ford Ranger into the median in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was so excited. I said, you need some time to think about this. I said, no. And that's how it came to be. So it was a blessing. It was either get my start there or Steubenville, Ohio as a photog / news reporter for, the pay in local news, you really have to pay your dues. That right now they are paying people right at the minimum wage level in a lot of cases. So to go to WWE where they paid me a lot better than that. They paid you enough to live in Stamford, Connecticut, and they gave you health benefits and taught you so much. Was just an incredible experience that changed my life.
Now, can you think back to your debut? And can you walk us through that day? What was it like?
Well, it depends on what you consider my debut, because you got to remember I was hired to be the studio guy. And they brought me in, and they didn't know what they wanted to do with me. They said, we're gonna figure this out. So WWE is so busy that they send all these shows to different countries. They'll chop them up, and they also are so good at promotion with the machine that they talk about, the marketing machine, that they will make specific promos for each market. So my first job was Canadian Slam Jams. I would go in there and I would say, hey, Saskatoon, the superstars are coming your way. Here's where you can get your tickets. And we would do that for every single market. And It was a lot of fun. It was cool. And then I had a tryout on the road, which was super stressful. I had just gotten hired. It was a split decision. And who was my first interview with? It was with Chavo Guerrero. Awesome guy. He was great. And we got done doing this interview, and the legend, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes came over, and he was giving me some criticism. I was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. This legend's over here. Well, long story short, it didn't make the show. And I thought right then, I said, that's it, I'm fired, I'm done. They hate me, I did something wrong. But it really just, it could have been something didn't come off right, or it didn't fit into the timing of the show. And I ended up going back to the studio, and that's where I did the bulk of my work until they put me back on the road.
And how, I know that you have your educational background in broadcast media and all that. How has that impacted your career? And also, do you think that there are some things that you thought may have been applicable that completely aren't?
I'm a firm believer in this world. You really have to adjust. You have to be flexible. You have to be versatile. I recommend college to everybody. I also recommend to do it in a financially prudent way. I used every single trick in the book. You know, I want to go back and yell at my high school teachers that gave community college this horrible stigma that only the losers go there, right? Because as soon as I started paying some of those University of Florida bills, and I came home and said, wait a minute, I can take American history at my community college for $200 or for $2,500 down here. Yeah, let me throw some community college electives on here. So I think a lot of what I learned in college was applicable, but I also remember sitting next to a very smart man on an airplane one time when I was a young man, and he said, hey, listen, kid, when you get into college, everything you learned in high school doesn't matter. When you get your first job, everything you learned in college doesn't matter. And that stuck with me because in a way that is true. When you go to a company like WWE or Broadcast News, they don't want to hear about everything you learned in college. You can use that for your own confidence, but it's really, you need to learn their way. You need to learn the WWE way. And I was there for 6 years, and that was an institution in and of itself. The things that they taught me, the education that they gave me. So very grateful that I went to school for broadcasting, but there are a lot of things you have to learn on the job.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Did you have specific mentors or people who inspired you during your career?
During the WWE run or during the...
During either, yeah.
Well, I would say coming up, I idolized a lot of sportscasters. And there was a guy, I cut my teeth doing motorsports, and that's what I'm doing now, actually. I'm back to doing a lot of motorsports. And there was a guy named Bill Stevens who was so generous. He taught me the right way, because what we learn in broadcasting is sometimes there's this competitive rivalry that you may have even experienced between ring announcers and talent, that I'm going to make this other person look bad to make myself look better. Bill Stevens was never like that, because I didn't know a whole lot about cars. This man's an encyclopedia. We would show up and do a show, and he would say, yeah, this is a 69 Camaro. Let me tell you all about it. Here's what you want to emphasize, and made me look great. So he was a mentor to me, and I always took that with me. Then when I got to WWE, a man who was so kind and was 100% like Bill Stevens was Mean Gene Okerlund. And I show up, I'm driving a 2004 Ford Ranger, right? That's hard to get into, a little two-seater. And Mean Gene would come in, I would say, once every 3 months to do a bunch of interviews for WWE and a bunch of Legends programs. And Mean Gene didn't have a ride home. They were going to get him a cab. And I said, ride back to the hotel, that is. I said, hey, if he doesn't mind getting in a truck, I'll take him. And poor Mean Gene, you know, he's got to get in my truck. He's used to getting car service. Didn't complain about it at all. And in fact, when we got to the hotel, I thought he was going to be like, all right, kid, you and your Ford Ranger, get out of here. He said, hey, you want to come in and have a drink with me? I was like, yeah. So I sat there with Mean Gene, and he ordered his martini and told me a few stories and gave me a few tips and some career advice, and he was great, one of the real good guys. And then from there on, I befriended Todd Grisham, who is still a good buddy of mine to this day, Jonathan Coachman, who's a great buddy of mine to this day. And these guys, like Scott Stanford, there's another one, there's a lot of them. These are legitimate sportscasters, where Scott Stanford was on TV in New York for a long time. Todd Grisham, Jonathan Coachman hosted SportsCenter. So the amount of talent that those guys had, understanding the sports side, the broadcasting side, and how different the WWE side was and any similarities there may be, really helped me out a lot.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And it's amazing to have so many mentors in your life like that. It's great. Thinking back, do you have a specific moment in your career that really sticks out to you, something that you hold dear to yourself?
Throughout the WWE career? Yes, I do, actually, and you can see it on YouTube. I became the studio guy. So you got to remember, there's an entire show that goes on the road, and those people rarely come to the studio because they're on the road 3, 4, 5, 6 days a week. Then they go home, and they're with their families, and then they're back out on the road. So they don't have time, typically. It would be impossible for them to come to Stamford, Connecticut. Well, there's also this entire production facility filled with all these shows for all these different countries, and they have needs every single day. So once I became the studio guy, I got a lot of work, and I liked it a lot. I said, yeah, use me. One of the things that they used me on was WWE 24/7. This was before the network. This was an on-demand channel, which was awesome. They would film a bunch of exclusive content. And this shows you how quick the world has changed, because now with YouTube, you can watch any match we want. But it used to be so special that every month they would release all these different matches, and oh my gosh, I haven't seen this one, unless you had it on VHS or DVD. So I'm doing 24/7 every month. We would do a preview show, and all of a sudden it's Forever Flair month. So Ric Flair comes in, and I have this great idea. I'd been there about 1.5 years, 2 years now, so I'm a little bit more confident. Where at first I was afraid of my shadow, let me just not offend anybody. And I thought, well, maybe wouldn't it be funny if we did this bit where I'm a huge Ric Flair fan, and I'm dressed up like him, and he comes in and he interrupts. And they said, yeah, sounds like a good idea. Not sure how it was going to go over. So Mr. Flair arrives, now that I understand the grind a little more, off probably some red eye, 10 days on the road. He's got his toothbrush with him. He's in there brushing his teeth, and I could tell, boy, he doesn't look like he's in the greatest mood. Probably what I look like when I get off in an airplane. I can tell you that. I travel enough now. Then here I am with a robe that, God bless our makeup artist, Jill. She was awesome. She made it. But you got to remember, what I didn't realize, she made this as a Halloween costume. This thing was probably valued at like $25. It was a bathrobe with sequences on it. Flair had legitimate multi thousands of dollars worth of these robes. So he's looking at me. He comes in. I got a terrible wig on, $25 robe, and I'm supposed to be him. And I could tell he wasn't impressed. He said, I do it once, kid. I do it once. And I'm like, I just got to make sure this comes off flattering. And he knows what a big fan I am. So I go into my Ric Flair impression. As soon as we say 3, he turned into the Nature Boy and did an absolute picture-perfect promo. Came out so well. I took off my wig. I apologized to him and just said I'm a big fan. And he was back to NWA days, cutting promos. I couldn't even stop him. It was great. It's still on my YouTube. And it was all about the great matches he had with Ricky Steamboat. And it was memorable. And then after that, he loved it. He said, hey, where are you going tonight? You want to go out with the Nature Boy? So Todd Grisham, Jonathan Coachman, Ric Flair, and I all went out on a random Tuesday night in Stamford, Connecticut. And let me tell you what, the story is about Ric Flair finding the party. I didn't think there would be a party in Stamford, Connecticut on a drizzly Tuesday night. He made it a party.
I can only imagine.
We walked into a place called The Grand, and everybody started recognizing him. You're woo, woo. Next thing you know, they're throwing bottles of wine over, and I'm like, this is what it's like to be Nature Boy, walk into a random place on a drizzly Tuesday night, and it turns into the biggest party you've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story.
Thank you for asking me.
Absolutely. What was it like seeing yourself on TV for the first time?
Well, I had already been on television with the motorsports that I was telling you about. I was very, very lucky that they had a good deal at that time with ESPN2, the production company that I was working with, and that helped me get the WWE audition because I had a lot of that on my tape. Also, I'd done a skit with Bill Goldberg, separate from WWE, and he was a great sport as well. He chokeslammed me at a car show because I said, I thought everything was bigger in Texas, but you look a little smaller than I thought, and then just hit me with a perfect choke slam, and we thought it was funny. So I had seen myself on TV before. Seeing myself on WWE television was like, wow, I cannot believe the production value, that I don't deserve to look this good. The makeup, the lighting, all that was perfect. So it really made me up my game that I need to hold up my end of the bargain if they're going to make me look this great. So I remember watching myself over and over and over again, and I recommend that to any talent out there. Some talent, they don't like to watch their stuff back. I said, watch it. It's going to be painful. You're your own worst critic, but that is a good thing. Watch it till you perfect your craft, and what I found is that's always a work in progress, even now at age 40, and I would just continually try to find ways to get better. And the thing that WWE really taught me that I am so proud of is personality and ability to ad-lib, to sit up here and just talk. Because you go to a news station, they're going to teach you how to read the teleprompter. They're going to teach you how to do a stand-up and talk for 15 seconds on a hard news story. Very few people can just take a microphone, turn on the camera, and let's rock. Let's go. And that's what WWE teaches you.
Well, you're doing a fantastic job, I can say that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No,
Cut me off at any time, because I'm certainly not that interesting.
Well, I find you very interesting, so thank you. What, even throughout your entire, all of your careers, do you have a most memorable or most favorite place that holds something dear to you? A venue or a city, any of those?
Gosh, there's so many of them. Being a part of WrestleMania 27 live was special just because watching the fanfare and the fact that, I mean, now it's multiple days, the show. Back then, just the convention and watching people roll into town on a Monday, Tuesday. I was able to get in the ring, and this is when Triple H and The Undertaker were going head-to-head, WrestleMania 27. So one of the coolest moments for me is I'm in the ring. We got Scott Stanford behind me, Mean Gene Okerlund behind me, and we were just pumping up fans, doing stuff, Q&A, asking people, who do you like this Sunday, Triple H, The Game, or The Undertaker? And Triple H is over there signing autographs and can hear us and is going like this. And I'm like, that is just so cool, so memorable, so special. So I think that's one of my best memories of WWE. And then all of broadcasting, really, that, you know, it's such a sense of fulfillment when it's done. Mm-hmm. And you get through it because you want everything to come off without a hitch. You want to do a great job, and when the show is complete and you feel good about it, it's a buzz. It's a good feeling. Just like when it's a disaster, I still remember those shows, and boy, I made some mistakes out there. That's why I will say announcing wrestling, sports entertainment, whatever you want to call it, one of the hardest jobs in the world. And why I say that is if I'm doing baseball and I go talk to Shohei Ohtani and he tells me, hey, I like to eat Rice Krispies for breakfast, and I put 2 scoops of sugar on it. That's what makes me do so well. It's a fact. He said it. I can say it on the broadcast. Well, now you get into the wrestling world, and wait, can I say that? Does that match his character? Sometimes the things that the boys will tell you aren't necessarily approved. So you have to triple edit yourself on the fly while all this stuff is going on, and that's why guys like Michael Cole, Jim Ross, Gorilla Monsoon, they're just amazing at what they can do.
For sure, for sure. My husband and I were actually talking about that, and just what a difficult position that is. It really, truly is, I think, one of the most difficult from kind of a supporting role, for that matter, as opposed to being in the ring. Do you have any specific memories that you can think of perhaps some times that you were really excited to work with a specific person?
I remember when I first got there, Stone Cold Steve Austin came in. And again, I was just terrified of my own shadow. Let me shut my mouth. Let's try to make sure this job lasts more than 3 days. And Stone Cold comes in and, hey, I need a coffee. Can somebody go get me a coffee? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What do you like in it? Splenda and a half and half. Okay, great. I come in, I got a whole thing. I probably got 30 Splendas in my hand because I don't know how much he wants. 30 half and halves in his hands. He's like, oh, goddamn, thanks, son. I appreciate it. He could tell how nervous I was of him. I thought I was going to get stunned, and he was like, people don't realize I'm a nice guy. I'm a nice guy in person. So it's very exciting to work with him. When I did a backstage interview, got to interview The Miz, got to interview Randy Orton. That was pretty cool. Got to do actually a sit down with John Cena, which was very interesting. Not for publication, not for air. This was part of the employee experience. That everybody who worked at WWE was invited, and they got to get up close and personal with John Cena. And I'm just like you're doing right now. I was the host and got to ask him a bunch of questions, and he was super cool. He was really, really great sport with all that stuff. So that was something that I really looked forward to as well.
And how would you, speaking from a job perspective, how would you describe your time at WWE as, WWE as a company?
Well, I was there 6 years, like I said, very different. 5 years in the studio was completely different than the 1 year on the road. 1 year on the road, the best and the worst. I would never trade in the memories for everything. It was humbling to me at how difficult it was. What was difficult? The road grind. I mean, I would typically get a 4 a.m. wake-up call, car picks you up, takes you to the airport, you're delivered to a city, you get to that city at about 10, 11, you have time to go back to the hotel. Normally, I would try to go for a jog just to see, like, hey, I saw something in Texas, or I saw something in Seattle, but you couldn't take long because then you had to be at the arena by 2. Yep. So you hurry up, get your shower, get your suit out, go to the arena, and then figure out what you're covering, which oftentimes I wouldn't find out the card until half an hour before. So there's not a whole lot of prep that you can do. You try to do the most that you can. And I was still, the pros probably, you could send Michael Cole out with 0 prep and he'd give you an absolute masterpiece. I was very new. I was very nervous. Wanted to do as much homework as I could. So that was what was very difficult. What was exciting about that is, like I said, the thrill of a good show, which I think maybe the best moment that ever happened to me was after my 3rd show announcing on the road. I heard Mr. McMahon come in my ear and he said, you're doing a good job, by the way. I was like,
that's amazing.
Oh my, that was the best. Well, that was the only time I heard a good job, because trust me, there were a lot of times I didn't do a good job, but for him to give me that encouragement on day 3, which maybe he was even just giving me that push and saw how nervous I was, that it was really, really special.
Do you have a favorite person that you worked with?
Man, so many of them. I do a lot of commentary I got to do commentary with William Regal, Matt Stryker, Booker T. What amazed me is how different everybody would be alongside you as a broadcast partner. Got to call matches with Jonathan Coachman. I greatly enjoyed that. Still talk to him a lot. Called a few with Todd Grisham. Who I enjoyed working with the most, I really enjoyed working with Scott Stanford too. We had a nice chemistry that we would do the pre-show that would come on before WrestleMania, before SummerSlam, and we had so much fun with that because back at the studio, the pressure would be really, really dialed back because you didn't have the pressure of a live event going on and, oh my gosh, doors are going to be open in 20 minutes and let's hurry up and what are we calling? At the studio, we would have as much time as we needed to complete a show, so it was really enjoyable. I liked working with Scott a lot.
Mm-hmm. And when you were in the live environment, you were talking about kind of doing your homework. What did you do to prepare for that live experience?
Well, I can tell you what I know. I think I'm better at it now, and I know more now because here is the answer to the question: there's a lot you can't prepare for, and that helps me to this day because I get called out to do a lot of racing live streams. Some of these things are marathons, 8-9 hours. I can't listen to myself talk for 8-9 hours, let alone entertain people, but you got to just keep on going. So there has to be a part of it that's that. What you can tangibly prepare for is, like I said, I would have a cheat sheet of every WWE superstar with information, but I also learned you got to be very, very careful. That information goes out of date soon, and the psychology of the wrestling business changes. I remember one of the biggest mistakes I made towards the end is, let me remember this, this is when they were building the Big Show up. For something. Now, like maybe a year prior, they were building Tyler Rex, and Tyler Rex had taken Big Show off his feet. Now, again, sports announcer, recalling history, and trying to build up Tyler Rex. Well, Tyler Rex is so strong, he's even taking the Big Show off his feet. That was the wrong thing to say right then, because now they're building the Big Show for a program. Tyler Rex isn't really being built anymore, and I just really showed bad psychology. So that was an example of how you really, really have to be up on it. I would watch all the programming, which is as much programming as there is out now. Sometimes on pay-per-view weeks, you're talking 10, 12 hours a week. That's a lot to keep up with. So we try to keep as current on that as I possibly could, and just try to learn as much as I possibly could from the guys that have been doing it for years.
Mm-hmm. I know that you had a lot of mentors. I know that you had the opportunity to work with so many amazing, amazing talents. Are there any little nuggets or pieces of wisdom that you've gained, and if so, from whom?
Jim Ross gave me a lot of great advice. Something that I still do on my live streams that I know he's an advocate of, Joey Styles is an advocate of, is as announcers, you know, especially when we're ad-libbing, you fall into a comfort zone, right? And you want to use all these beautiful words that are in your arsenal, right? And a lot of times you just forget, you blank, because we're sitting here, we're talking conversationally. So they announce with a thesaurus in front of them, and it's targeted towards, sometimes they'll have heel, face, action, big, you know, every word that they may need to describe something, and then have about 16 or 17 synonyms down below. And that helps make your announcing more descriptive and get yourself out of that comfort zone and use more words, be more fluent. Mm-hmm. And it just gives more color to the broadcast. And something I still do.
That's a great piece of advice, for sure.
Yeah.
How would you describe the difference between your outside of WWE and what you do now, as opposed to inside?
Wow, I'm gonna try to be succinct here, because I could give you the 24-hour answer. Let me tell you this. My overriding theme is I'm so thankful for WWE, and they have taught me everything, and there is so much that I can apply from WWE to the action that I'm doing now on my YouTube channel, Cycle Drag, with motorsports. But let me tell you this, initially, tough transition out of WWE. The reason it is I was so proud of what I had done after that 6-year run, and then unfortunately 1 year I got caught in budget season and my contract didn't get renewed, and I'm thinking, I'm from WWE. I'm going to end up at Fox Sports. I'm going to end up at a regional sports network. Well, here's what I found. A lot of the upper crust journalists do not respect it. And as soon as you say WWE, they don't want anything to do with you. And I thought that was so unfair. And I remember telling some of my bosses and mentors back at WWE, and they couldn't believe it either. They're like, you know, these are guys that couldn't do what we do on a daily basis. So I remember some of these small stations. I was just telling my buddy Kyle's here, who we work news together. I tried so hard to get into News 12. They wouldn't even look at me. Because I'm trying to stay in Stamford, Connecticut. And whether it was an entry-level job or whatnot, they just wouldn't. And finally, I was able to break into news, and I think you got to remember, some of these guys that have spent their career in a newsroom and just think of WWE as the circus have no idea. One of the gentlemen where I worked with Kyle in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, he told me on the third day, he said, we didn't realize you were going to do this good. We thought you were going to come in with a cape and a mask. And it's like, guys, I did go to school, okay? I can tell a story. And when you're talking sports, personality is a good thing. Yes. Hard news, which I never intended to do, I got thrown into, you got to be careful with. And with this guy right here, Kyle, we worked at WGAL in Lancaster. Not a big sports town because it's central Pennsylvania. You got Penn State, and that's about it. You don't have a sports team. So hard news drives everything. Yeah. So I go there intending to be a sports guy. All of a sudden, I'm a straight news guy, and we end up at stabbing scenes. We end up at fires. We end up at horrible, horrible tragedies. But really, you know, we stuck together, and some of the same fundamentals I learned at WWE that never believed that I applied to hard news stories, but just the camera presence, the confidence, speaking well, no matter what you're talking about across the board, those principles will help you out in television. It's where I learned the fundamentals. Whether the upper crust people want to admit it or not, WWE is a great training ground. And the people that do know the business will respect the production value of wrestling in WWE because it's one of the best in the world.
Couldn't agree more, for sure. And hopefully, with examples like yours, the respect factor will continue to go up, as WWE progresses.
Yeah, and a lot of, like I said, Jonathan Coachman, Todd Grisham, they're sitting there doing 10 p.m. Sports Center. I mean, I got a picture of it. I was so proud of those guys. They have since moved on to other things. Coach is doing really well right now with CBS. Todd Grisham is calling boxing on DAZN, and I'm sure he would tell you the same story that I do. A lot of those are the same lessons he learned at WWE. I can call a drag race and apply the same psychology as WWE. It is two individuals facing off. There's going to be a winner and a loser. What do people connect with? They want to be emotionally invested. It's not just red bike, blue bike. Tell me who the people are. Why do I care? Why should I be emotionally invested in these people? These are all storytelling elements that WWE is so great at that work with any entertainment company. And what are we seeing? UFC has taken a lot of the WWE production. I mean, Conor McGregor. What is Conor McGregor for all those years? Marketed exactly like a WWE guy and smashed records over there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's amazing how many things that you can actually apply inside and outside. So
there's a lot more to it than people think.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to it. Todd Grisham told me a funny story. This one's terrible. I see cameras. It's a good example though. So when I couldn't get a job, and I'm so disappointed because I'm so proud of my tape. I'm doing WWE 24/7 with The Undertaker behind me. I'm interviewing Randy Orton backstage, and these are all things in Stamford, Connecticut that, I mean, this is amazing. Jack, you rose from small studio guy to backstage SmackDown. So I remember I sent it to like Albany, New York, and immediately the 65, 70-year-old upper crust news guy laughed me right out and wouldn't even give me a look. So Todd Grisham broke it down to me like this. He said, with some of these guys, here's the unfortunate thing. He said, you're like a great actress sending in your tape, but your tape is full of porn. They can't get past the porn, and you're saying, look, I'm a great actress, and they say, no, your tape is full of porn. So as soon as they saw The Undertaker in shot one with some of these guys that don't respect it, I was out. That's what he did. That was a pretty good example of what he gave me. So luckily, we did find individuals who respected it a little bit more. ESPN respects it. They have to because they realize, I mean, some of the best personalities in the world. ESPN has adopted a lot of WWE style.
Which is amazing.
Yes.
Absolutely. So let's kind of turn it back a little bit for your time on the road. Any war stories, any rib stories, for that matter?
Well, when you, again, I would understand things so much better now. I wasn't 100% sure exactly how to behave, and because of that, I looked to my mentors and saw what they did and learned quickly the respect factor was huge. And for me, I guess the way my personality is, I come from that PR, marketing, racing background, always want to be out in front of people, You also have to realize at WWE, it's a lot like being in the military, that for people that are so respected, don't speak unless spoken to. Maybe go give them that handshake, but that's it. You have to pay your dues because that's what they did, and that's the way they were treated when they got in there. That I think about, for instance, The Undertaker. Unbelievably great guy, but just the respect that he commanded backstage. He was so revered by everybody, and that was someone that I said, I'm going to shake this man's hand, and then he is not going to hear a word from me unless he speaks to me, because I don't even, until I'm on the road for 5 years or make it that far, I don't deserve it. I had an experience where I went up to The Rock. I said, I got to just shake his hand. I grew up with him. He was backstage for a spot appearance. Sir, thank you very much. Nicest guy in the world. Asked me, so what do you do? Tell me about you. And I'm like, The Rock wants to know what I do? I'm like dying inside that I just want to get out of his way and not tie up any of his time. But spent 3-4 minutes with me and was just super, super cool. So in terms of the ribs, I think CM Punk got me the best. He embarrassed me in front of all the divas. He was probably, as we know now about CM Punk, wasn't having the best time on the road, and this was right after the pipe bomb promo. I went up to him, and again, I'm just trying to be nice, but that fine line of don't speak unless spoken to, and I just said, sir, great job, loved your promo. He went, ho, everybody, Jack Korpela says I did a good job. Oh, I must have done a good job if Jack Korpela says I did a good, everybody, I am now worth something. And it went on and on and on, and the divas are, I'm just dying. I'm thinking, oh God, just let me exit stage right, I'm embarrassed. But other than that, not too bad. Most of the guys, if you approached them at a good time, it was wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And we have heard so many stories about the travel and the car rides and things like that. Did you have a travel buddy?
I'd be coming from home base, so typically I would fly with Matt Stryker. He would be coming out of, where did he live? He lived on Long Island. So we would always meet up at LaGuardia Airport early in the morning, same flight out. But I got to say, WWE treated us so well that we always had our own cars. Sometimes I hear those stories about having, a close nucleus of guys in the car together. Mm-hmm. I never really got to experience that because I was kind of off on an island as an announcer, and I always had to get back very quickly.
Right.
A lot of times what made my grind tough is SmackDown would be ending at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. You'd be on a plane 6 a.m. Wednesday morning. I'd be in the studio noon trying to host WWE Bottom Line or The Experience or something that would go overseas. A lot of times I wouldn't have enough brain cells left to do it. I'd be living on Diet Mountain Dew or a Diet Monster to get through it. But because of that, I always had to get back. I traveled a few times with Grisham, and that was always fun. I think Stryker and I, sometimes like during WrestleMania week, they'd put us together if it was a lot of consecutive stops. Mm-hmm. And it's fun. You get to see the road. You get to go out to eat together. You get to tell a lot of stories. You look for gyms together and look for ways to pass the time together.
Mm-hmm. Any favorite places to eat?
I was simple. Geez, you give me a Chipotle, I'm happy. But Grisham told me when we were up in Canada, he said there's this place called The Keg you got to try out. And they have great steak. It's kind of like it's like Canada's Outback Steakhouse, and it is good. So before I left there, we were down in Mexico one time too. That was a lot of fun because I was friends with a lot of the production staff, and I would hang out with them. And I remember we had like the best chips and salsa and quesadilla I ever had in my life in Mexico as we were waiting to get on a plane and come home.
Mm-hmm. Nothing better than authentic Mexican.
You
sure.
talk about authentic Mexican. That was authentic Mexican, for sure.
Absolutely. We are running a little bit on time.
Thank you very much.
But I just wanted to toss it out to the audience. Does anyone have any questions or stories or anything that they want to hear?
So what, you said that you had to do it the wrong way. When you out there in WWE, you got to do it WWE's way. How do you approach that? Because every company's different. How do you approach it and say, I want to do it your way?
Get as much feedback as you can. Take a look at the tapes of people that came before you. Typically, you're going to have a producer. Work closely with that producer. Make sure they're happy. Constantly ask for feedback. Constantly ask. Somebody was telling the story last night. It was Mike McGurk that said she went up to Vince afterwards and said, how'd I do? How'd I do? And he said, don't ever ask me how you're doing. And that makes sense because that man is so busy. But as a talent, that's what you want. You want to ask everybody, and you get a lot of opinions. And that's what I would do. I would, what can I do better? What would you like to see? Especially go to your bosses, keep them happy, see how you mesh, see how you fit in. And I had really, really good bosses there. I had a guy named Tommy Carlucci, who's still very, very close to me. He was head of international television, had watched some of my shows, do this, sell this a little bit, drive this home, put this over. And if you're keeping those people happy, you're on the right track.
Is there anything Michael Cole said to you that kind of stuck with you, or any advice that he gave you that you still use in your drag racing?
Yeah, he was instrumental. When towards the end, I was on Superstars, and they also put me over to NXT. When I took that step over to NXT, I was very fortunate that Michael Cole sat down with me for half an hour at a time and gave me a ton of knowledge. He talked about, the emotion, selling the emotion. I remember the words to describe. He was big on the thesaurus. He was also big on, too, that you can't go out there and be overly excited, right? Because if you're always at a 9.5, where are you going to go? So it just like the wrestlers ebb and flow, and it's a story. Same thing for an announcer. If you're WrestleMania main event the entire time, this is a 20-minute match, where are we going to go? Are we going to talk like this the whole time? The fans aren't going to be able to get used to this. You need to slowly reel them in as the sadistic Viper gets back to his feet. Kane, here comes Kane. So it's a roller coaster, and you have to be able to sell that. And Michael Cole, very good at that. For him to last as long as he has, I don't think people appreciate how well he does his job. And, Mr. Vincent Kennedy McMahon, the genius, he had done it himself. So I'm going to tell you right now, he's the harshest critic when it comes to announcing. And there's a lot of times people will, it's been well documented, leave that announce booth and are not, it's terrible. You wonder, am I going to lose my job? Is this it? But Michael Cole has stood the test of time and has done an amazing job dealing with all the criticism and continuing to evolve.
Is The Miz as much of a jerk?
I think The Miz is cool, to tell you the truth. And it's very similar personality. There's not, just like Flair, it's him turned up. That's it. So what you see, The Miz, he loves his football. He loves his fantasy football. I got to have my best memory with Miz was we were in Pittsburgh. He's a big Cleveland guy. There's a place in Pittsburgh called Permane Brothers. It's what we're known for. They put their fries and their coleslaw right on the sandwich. And I took him there, and he went, "This looks disgusting," and then ate the whole sandwich and was happy. And he said, "All right, the only thing that's disgusting is you guys like the Steelers." But he's a good guy. I always found him to be a good-hearted dude.
If you could work with anybody from before your time at WWE or after WWE, who would you?
I would have loved to have met Gorilla Monsoon. And I think that's a reason why I'm here today, because WrestleMania 5, WrestleMania 3, all these memories that I tell you, I enjoyed listening to the commentary just as much as I did the matches. And I think that's what really got me hooked on announcing. There was something about Gorilla that just, he understood the psychology so well. He always got you excited and pumped up. I don't care what was going on. How many times did he say, "They're jammed back to the rafters"? And you couldn't help but just be so excited. And it was such natural enthusiasm. And I heard from my mentor, Tommy Carlucci, who has a picture of him in his house, Gorilla treated him like a son. That's how he treated everybody. He's just a special, special guy. Funny Gorilla story I'll tell you real quick, too, is he loved to gamble. So they tell me one time they're shooting a piece at Atlantic City, I think it was during WrestleMania, and they needed footage of somebody playing blackjack. Gorilla says, "Oh, okay, I'll sit down." And they're just thinking he's faking it. They're going like this, they're going like this. And then all of a sudden, Gorilla gets up. Gorilla tips the blackjack guy $300. And they're like, Gorilla, we're just playing around. You don't got to do that. You don't tip him." He's like, "Well, I just won $3,000." So
That's a great story.
I would have loved to have met him. God rest his soul. A lot of people don't realize he was one of when Vince bought WWF off his father, Gorilla was one of the initial investors there in the beginning. Very, very important guy.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
When you were doing yours, were you able to pre-roll, or was he scripted in your ear? If he was in your ear, how difficult was that to do?
Okay, so are you talking about my studio work, or are you talking about announcing at the desk? That's why it's so tough. So I was blessed that Mr. Vincent, I don't even know what to call him, but he doesn't like being called, in person, call me Vince. His character's Mr. McMahon. Which one was in my ear? Sometimes a combination of both, right? So a few times he was in my ear. And I took that as flattery, because a lot of times he was so busy getting ready for the shows. These writer meetings they'll change, as you've heard, they'll change the script as the show's going on. They are very, very busy. But, you're ad-libbing. You're ad-libbing 100%, but you also have certain things that you have to throw in there. And if he says something in your ear, then boy, you better say it pretty quick. And I would try to learn on those things. One thing that he told me that sticks with me to this day is I would be commentating an old school style, because commentary evolves as well. And he said, don't give me that radio crap in my ear. He didn't say crap. He said something else. But what he meant by that, and it's genius, and I still use it today, and if it's television, you don't have to call it like it's radio and call every move and every single thing that you see. People can already see that. So what you can add to it is a story. Tell me a story, and now you're just getting entertainment overload. You're watching the guys in the ring. I'm also giving you background and entertaining you to where if I'm doing my job, you could turn off the TV and I'd still entertain you. Or you could turn down the volume and still be entertained. That's when you know that you got something. So if you listen to some of these guys on the indie circuit where clothesline, headbutt, off the top rope, that's really, really old school, and you just don't need to do it anymore. It's more about storytelling.
Any other questions?
How is Scott Stanford influenced your career? You said you're good friends and you do a lot of studio work.
Good friends, because anytime you get to work, you try to take a little piece of everybody with you and learn something. This is a guy who was a sportscaster in Manhattan. So for me, as an aspiring sportscaster, that's market number one. And I think that helped get him a lot of respect at WWE. And just a true pro, a veteran. So he played his cards right, too. It can be very political, where you want to make some noise and push and show you're ambitious, but not too much. You don't want to be, if you be a pest, eventually, if knows the answer, or this is the show that you're on for now, no, you're not going to be backstage at WrestleMania. You got to understand where that fine line is, that you don't want to get in trouble. He was very good at that. He's very good at playing the political game. He was a salesman before that. He knew how to talk to people. So I would look at the way that he would have meetings with some of these bosses, that a lot of times he was older than some of these bosses. Way better than dealing with them than I was in those situations. So I would try to learn. And the biggest thing is just keep a level head, be calm, be collected. You never want to come, even if you have complaints. It's like the great Jim Ross says. What does he always say? He says, converse, don't criticize. If you have and that is big. And that is something that I have learned, because we all have complaints at work. Talk about it. Don't come at somebody hard. Jim Ross said on one of his podcasts, he said a lot of the people that I would take into events, I would have to take them right out the back door, because they just got terminated because they put their foot in their mouth, burned a bridge, said something horrible, and that's never a constructive situation.
I think that can apply to any position that you're in, for sure.
Any position. That's good life advice, and that's even, as I told my buddy Kyle, I mean, we had some epic meltdowns in news where, like, you're sending us to another homicide scene at 11:30 at night, and it's just like, we'll talk about it Monday when cooler heads prevail, when we go home and get some sleep. Now's not the time to call any bosses and start screaming on the phone. That'll be our last day at work. Yep. So I always try to take that with me, that I'm a passionate guy. I can be a fiery guy. I like to sleep on things. I like to let me think about that for a couple days. Let me let this anger settle down. Let me try to remove myself from the situation. And what advice would I give somebody else? What advice would I give you if you were in this situation and somebody was treating you that way? If I was your agent, how would I represent you? Sometimes those are better ways to come at problems and be a good professional, because breaking a table in half and storming out is not good for longevity. And that's happened to a lot of people, unfortunately, in broadcasting, that are no longer in broadcasting.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as we wrap up, I want to thank the audience for being here today. I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored that anybody remembers me. 6 great years of my life, 1 year on the road, and still out there. Love TV, love wrestling. I have a YouTube channel called Cycle Drag. I hope you guys check it out. That a lot of what I learned at WWE, I'm applying, and it got big enough that 4 months ago I got to interview Jay Leno at Jay Leno's garage, and that was really, really special for me, and something that we'd like to work on. That I talked with him is maybe on the wish list. I know the Undertaker likes to ride motorcycles. I wouldn't mind setting that interview up, and you might see that one pop up on my YouTube channel if all goes well.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed, because that would be amazing.
Thank you very much. And I wish you all the best, too, because you're doing a great job, and you did a great job at the Hall of Fame last night. So
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you all. That concludes the session.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.